One thing that we haven't been able to change yet, and it's starting to change, is that you go to a grocery store, a dozen eggs, a gallon of milk, a pound of bacon, still costs more than it did before the pandemic. That's a lot of money for people. It's taken time to change that. So there's reason for frustration, but there's gigantic change been made.
But Mr. President, over the period of your life, I feel like there's been a change in CEO culture. What do you have to say about CEO culture in America?
Well, that's how they get compensated. The stock price goes up, their salary goes up. I think the compensation culture is off. And I also think we're moving back, though. That's why fundamentally I wanted to change the dynamic.
Mr. President, you came into the Senate in 1972. People didn't follow stock trades, and you could have, if you wanted to get wealthy. You could have gone in early on Google and Boeing and Microsoft and NVIDIA and Amazon. You could have been an early investor. You didn't, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't own any stocks for that whole period of time. When nobody was looking, there was no Stock Act, nobody was checking you. Why?
For 36 years, I was listed as the poorest man in the Senate. Not a joke. You know that listing they had? I mean, in Congress, not the Senate, House and Senate. I never thought I was poor. I had a salary that a senator made. But, I don't know how you look your constituents in the eye and know because the job they gave you an inside track to make more money. I think we should be changing the law at the federal level that nobody in the Congress should be able to make money in the stock market while they're in the Congress. Everything I've done in my career has been designed to change the trickle-down economic theory to a theory that talked about how we're going to deal with benefiting people by increasing productivity, by buying American, by selling products that are made in America, et cetera.
Mr. President, you grew up in a generation I think we've moved a little bit away from where people would check the tags on the back of their shirts. And what were they looking for? Made in America.
Yep.
They look at the VIN, the vehicle identification number on cars. What were they looking for? Made in America. That seems to mean something to you.
There used to be a situation where we made it in America, but what happened? Corporate America got greedy. What they decided to do was find the cheapest labor in the world, send the product they were going to make to that state, that place, that nation, and import the product back. And so, not my watch. What we do is we're making sure we make it here. Gives people a real shot. I really mean this. It sounds corny, but everybody deserves a chance. So when I got in office as president, I tried to do what I used to work with Bernie doing too and others. Well, not all the years I was in the Senate. That is, give people an even shot. We used to make those little computer chips about the size of the end of my little finger here. Well, we used to make 40%. We invented them. We made 40% of them. We made virtually none anymore. So what happened was when the pandemic came and those factories in Asia closed down that were making these chips, guess what? A new automobile needs 300 of them. We didn't have them. Computers, cell phones, whole range of things. We didn't have them. So what happened? Price of automobiles skyrocketed. There's 60, 70, $80 billion in computer chip manufacturing occurring here in the United States now. We're virtually gone. But the problem is we knew it's going to take a while for to get shovels in the ground and get it moving, so I haven't seen it yet. But you don't need a college degree to make them. You know what the average salary is? $103,000. And it goes into all the construction going on. The skilled craftsman.
And the next guy, obviously, he has thoughts on old tariffs and all kinds of things he wants to do. But correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a vision, too, of targeted tariffs in which you think for the preservation of American jobs and communities, they can be useful. Help educate people. How should we think about tariffs, Mr. President?
If we allow a country, China, for example, to flood the market with a product where they're paying the equivalent of 1/3 we're paying for employees to do, and they're not getting paid at home. Guess what? That puts Americans out of work. That's different than saying every product we import from a country, we're going to add a tariff to, because that just increases Americans' costs. And so what we want to do is we want to change the behavior of countries. So I had what they call a come to the Lord meeting, a little other phrase, with Xi Jinping. He said, why are you so tough on us? I said, real simple. You say you can't invest in China, a business, unless a Chinese entity owns 51% of the business. How's that fair trade? So we're going to do the same thing with you. And it won't, wait. There's certain things that relate to fair trade where you break the international rules of competition in ways that are just unfair. It should be dealt with. Conversely, if you say no matter what you import to the United States, there's going to be a tariff on it, who pays the tariff? The middle class. I was finally, after all these years, with the help of guys like Bernie and others on the floor, allow Medicare to negotiate how much they'll pay for a drug that they're being paid for Medicare. Well, they fought that for years. Well, guess what? It's now the law. Now, for the first time, Medicare is able to negotiate these prices. Guess what it's doing? Saving the taxpayer $160 billion. So instead of paying $400 for that medicine, they're paying $35. So the point is that corporate greed got out of hand, in my view. One thing that we haven't been able to change yet, and it's starting starting to change, is that you go to a grocery store, a dozen eggs, a gallon of milk, pound of bacon, still costs more than it did before the pandemic. That's a lot of money for people. It's taken time to change that. So there's reason for frustration, but there's gigantic change been made.
But the thing that I think is, because I'm wrestling with that same question, Mr. President, I know you are too. Why are people still feeling an unease about an economy that clearly has macroeconomic indicators improving? And at least from my impression, the math is getting harder for some middle class families to make. If you look at affording college right now, it takes up a higher percentage of middle class income. The big picture stuff, the owning a car, childcare, some of the biggest items in people's lives when they think about generational wealth and having their kids grow up. I think the math just shows it's harder now.
It is. That's why I forgave billions of dollars in student loans. Billions. It's good for America. It helps America. And they can then go buy the home. I pushed very hard, as others have. Didn't get it done. For child care tax credit. That increases economic growth. A woman can go to work knowing her child's going to be okay, knowing things are going to work, increasing productivity across the board. And it's just beginning to sink in. But I think that it's hard to tell someone about the hundreds of thousands of jobs we created with the CHIPS and Science Act when they haven't seen it yet.
You put tough cops on the beat to investigate and go after things like big oil collusion, fight the Kroger-Albertsons merger, which, by the way, Judge, agreed with your FTC today on this, the junk fees and the late fees. My impression is people didn't know that your administration was going after corporate greed in certain ways, and yet you made these decisions to put people in charge as regulatory watchdogs. Why?
National Labor Relations Board is supposed to accommodate labor. They're putting people on the boards that are against unions. Ridiculous. We changed that. We changed that, but it takes time for it to sink in. It takes time for it to take root. And one last thing. The fact is that there are a lot of junk fees out there. You bounce a check, hey, $35? I change that, it's $5. For someone making $100,000 with 3 kids, $35 is a lot of money. You want to take your kid on a plane ride with you. You have all these hidden fees. You have hidden fees and overdrafts for your credit card, hidden fees. And we want to get rid of all that because it saves people hundreds of dollars.
What is your reaction to the fact that you see a lot of the billionaires coming in? I mean, you didn't have any billionaires, right? And here we got, I think, somewhere up to 14, 15 billionaires running the United States government.
We have 1,000 billionaires, America. You know what their average tax they pay? Average federal tax? 8.2%. 8.2%. If you're working on a diner, you're paying a hell of a lot higher federal tax than that. So look, I just think that Americans are beginning to catch on to what's going on. And I think that's why you're going to see a lot of what we've been able to get done. I don't think you're going to see the Republicans get rid of it. They're going to figure out the Republic's not going to like them getting rid of it. For example, last time this guy was president, he created the largest deficit than any president in modern history, number one. And number two, he and Herbert Hoover, the only 2 people ever came in with more jobs than they went out with. They lost more jobs. I mean, the system isn't working, but we're going to see what happens. I see how he responds. So I think we're going to have a comeuppance now. We have a real contrast to be made. What I did in 4 years, what's going to happen in the next 4 years? They're going to create more jobs like I did or fewer jobs? Is inflation going to go up or is it going to go down? Are we going to keep the unemployment rate as low as it is or is the unemployment going to go up? Are we going to find ourselves with a higher deficit or a lower deficit? Are we going to have to cut so badly in order to get what they want done in terms of tax cuts for the super wealthy that we lose Medicare? We have drastically cut Medicare, Social Security, and other programs that people count on. Well, we're about to have our comeuppance. We're going to find pretty soon.
Thanks for what you're doing, Mr. President. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. I hope this was useful. I hope I answered your question.